Okay, part 2 of chapter 4. Sorry, guys, got interrupted before. So let's try this again. All right, so we said the Clue Crew rules. When they reached the Drew house, the girls thundered up the stairs to their detective headquarters. Bess sat on Nancy's bed and bounced a stuffed unicorn on her lap. George sat at Nancy's desk and turned on the computer. Her eyes were glued to the screen as she began a new case file. If this mystery is about ice cream, Bess said, does that make it a cold case? No, Bess, said Nancy. Nancy said, a cold case is a case that hasn't been solved. My dad told me that while we were watching a mystery show on TV. And we are going to solve this mystery, George said. Files up. What do we know so far? Nancy paced around her shaggy lavender carpet. The person who stole Kendra's recipe is probably a kid, she said slowly. Someone who knew about the recipe and wants to win really badly. The Jim and Barry fan club wants to win badly, Bess said. They said so themselves. And Daisy Dorfer was standing right behind Kendra in the sign-up line. Nancy remembered. Daisy Dorfer? George said as she typed suspect number 1. Bess tossed the unicorn in the air. Kevin Garcia asked about Kendra's recipe. She said, what about him? Nancy shook her head. Why would Kevin enter a contest for something he can't eat? She asked. Especially since his parents would have to sign a permission slip if he won, George added. Next, the girls thought of all the things the thief would need to make Kendra's recipe. First up, chocolate. Lots and lots of chocolate. Speaking of ice cream, George said. She turned around in her chair. I wonder how our flavor is doing. Let's taste it, Bess said. We already tasted it, Nancy said, and George shrugged. We didn't taste it after it was in the freezer for hours, she said. The girls raced out to Nancy's room and ran down the stairs into the kitchen. Nancy opened the freezer and pulled out the ice cream container. As she pulled off the lid, woof! Chip jumped up against Nancy. She dropped the whole container of the flavor with a thunk. No, Nancy cried. Vanilla ice cream and blueberries have spilled onto the floor in big frozen clumps. The girls stared at Chip, lapping up the ice cream. At least it wasn't chocolate, George sighed. Chocolate isn't good for dogs. Nancy felt awful. If only she had held the container tighter. If only she wasn't such a klutz. Look, see the dog? He's eating the ice cream. Now we'll have to make our ice cream all over again, Nancy said, and that means buying more ingredients. Hannah came into the kitchen with a mop. I'd drive you to the supermarket, girls, she said, but I have a casserole in the oven. I'll call my mom, George said. She goes to the supermarket almost every day. Louise Fain owned her own catering company. She planned parties all over River Heights and even provided the food for Nancy. Mrs. Fain's van always smelled like coleslaw and pickled tomatoes. I'm picking up fruit platters for Mayor Strong's birthday party this Saturday, Mrs. Fain said as she drove her van. It's going to be a party of the year. Nancy, Bess, and George sat behind Mrs. Fain. The seat behind them was filled with coleslaw containers. Why is Mayor Strong's birthday party the same day as the ice cream contest? Bess asked. That's how it works, Mrs. Fain said as she pulled the van into the supermarket parking lot. Once inside the supermarket, Nancy saw lots of other kids. Their baskets and shopping carts were filled with all kinds of foods to make ice cream with. I have to go to the deli section, Mrs. Fain said. You can pick up your own items as long as you stay together and don't run. The girls nodded. Shopping on their own always made them feel grown up. Mrs. Fain walked away. Nancy grabbed a red plastic shopping basket while George unfolded their shopping list. Bess walks to the dairy section for a container of milk. After putting it in the basket, they looked for blueberries. Fruit is against the wall, George said. The healthy stuff is always against the walls. Bess started to run down the aisle. Last one, there is a rotten watermelon, she called. Bess, wait, Nancy called. We're not supposed to run in the supermarket, remember? Nancy and George raced after Bess, and when all reached the end of the aisle, they sped around the corner. Wham! The girl slammed right into Kevin Garcia. Nancy dropped her basket with the container of milk. Luckily, the milk didn't open and spill, but everything tumbled out of Kevin's basket. There was a box of chocolate ice cream pops, a package of chocolate-dipped ice cream cones, 2 cans of chocolate drink, and 3 jumbo chocolate bars. Nancy stared at Kevin's package on the floor. Kevin wasn't allowed to eat sweets. What was he doing with all that chocolatey stuff? Sorry, you guys, Bess said. Kevin muttered something under his breath. He picked up his packages and shoved them back into his basket, and then he stood up and quickly walked away. Did you see that? George asked. I sure did, Nancy said, nodding. Kevin's basket was a chock full of chocolate. So do you think that Kevin stole the recipe? We'll find out in Chapter 5 next time. Sticks and cones. Okay.